But they both get to clear that, and they get to move beyond that. And both insurance companies are made happy. So let's just run a little experiment here, just a little time travel, just for my amusement, and yours maybe. Let's close our eyes just for a moment. Just take a deep breath and just relax. I want you to go back to the home you lived in when you were 8 years old. From the outside, just look at the house from the street. Look at the front yard. Look at the toys that might be laying there, a bicycle perhaps, or a car parked in. Look at the color of the house. What kind of plants might have been growing there, whether the lawn was cut. And then you go to the front door and knock on the door, and your 8-year-old self opens the door. You invite yourself in. And invite yourself back to your bedroom and look at your favorite toys, models or dolls, games, whatever it is you played with when you were 8 years old. And now it's time to go to the supper table and you sit down and you're having a meal with your family and your 8-year-old self, but only your 8-year-old self can see you. And that's finished. Your 8-year-old self takes you back to the front door, opens it up. You step out onto the front porch. Turn around and face your 8-year-old self. You get to tell yourself one thing. You decide right now what that thing is. Now come back and open your eyes. Some of you felt that. Some of you felt the information that you gave to your 8-year-old self and brought it forward. A shudder, a shiver, some kind of realization. Like Back to the Future. That's as simple as time travel is. So when you look at this potential of all potentialities, it's kind of a fog. It's kind of not really understandable. And this is where it started to gel. This is where it really started to make sense. If we're in this potential of all potentialities, why is it that we block the universe every time we ask for something like, well, what do you really dream of? What do you want out of life? And we say, well, I want $1 million. You do, okay. Why do you want $1 million? One of my friends says, well, so I can move my family from the Philippines to the US and I won't have to worry about where my next meal's coming from. Okay, so it's not really the $1 million that you want. It's moving your family from the Philippines and not having to worry about where your next meal is coming from. But you have told the universe, nah, it's $1 million and I'm taking nothing less. And it doesn't come because it doesn't resonate. How do we get what will resonate with the universe relative to that dream to come forward? Aha! This golden mean, this golden ratio, 1.618 to 1, the relation of energy and consciousness, from which the universe spontaneously becomes more ordered out of chaos. Out of entropy comes the one and only kind of universe that will form naturally, on its own, because of this resonance. When energy comes together in this kind of ratio, it constructively builds on itself. The proportion is the result of dividing the two consecutive numbers in a set, like length by width, like buildings, like when we look at the human face, we see it. When we look at other structures in nature, like the sunflower, when we look at pine cones, and even when we look at seashells, we see this. I have a very short film here that was put together that describes in visually how the Fibonacci sequence comes together. We talk about 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. You see how they add together in a sequence. It creates a spiral of energy. This is how the universe constructs itself out of chaos. This is how biology works. This is how molecules come together in the periodic chart. It's how music functions. It's how DNA works. Structure after structure in nature, we see this ratio repeated to us as a testimony that this ratio is supported by the universe. Geometries and relationships between shapes come together when we analyze them from this point of view. Grids of energy, shapes and motions. Then we can explain the variety of the universe. Then we can understand the complexity of nature. So what about this man Fibonacci, Leonardo da Pisa, like the Leaning Tower of? This mathematician who discovered this sequence 0, 1, 1, 2, 5, 8, 13. This number phi, as we divide these two numbers together, 34 and 55 divided into one another, we get this number, this golden proportion. This sequence is well known since he discovered it in 1170. But what about the process? What about how man fits into this with his consciousness? What can we do to make use of this information? This is called the Phoenix sequence, the process of conscious creation. You've seen it from 0. What happens if we take any two numbers? What happens if we just start somewhere, anywhere? How about now? And take two numbers, two events, two energies, and put them together. A dream, an intention, a reaction to that intention. And we move forward with it, 8 iterations, 8 steps forward. I did it for you, you don't have to mentally do that. But you end up with this sequence, just like the Fibonacci sequence, except this is random. And it occurs with integers and non-integers, fractions and decimals. I've done it thousands of times. Guess what you get? 1 618 to 1. Over and over again. So I said to myself, wait, that means that anything that you tried, 8 iterations, any dream that you put that kind of energy into, as long as you know when to move, when to tap, when to apply the energy, when to make the phone call, when to accept the job offer, when to make the investment, it's got to work. So I went and interviewed people that were very successful, notably successful in their fields. Stock investors, real estate investors, baseball players, golfers. How many tries did it take you before you began to be in this zone where you had this resonance going, that even though you were putting forth the same effort, you were putting it forth at exactly the right moment in this sequence of events? The response? 8. 8. It was my 8th try at the majors. It was my 8th Pro-Am. It was my 8th home investment. It was almost my 8th bankruptcy before I became successful in investment. Somehow I just knew when to do it. I knew what to do. This was profound. The golden mean applied to bringing forth order out of chaos, applying human consciousness to the equation. The golden proportion in manifestation. So now, when we're talking about recalling not from the past, but recalling from the future, it becomes very interesting, because now we're looking into a soup of potentialities, of probabilities, which quantum physicists love, and the potential of all of this is at our grasp. And a familiar cartoon, Dilbert, actually this is a likeness of Dilbert. I can remember that in the future, I choose the soup, not the salad. So, I'll choose a salad instead. But would that mean that my memory of the future was wrong? No, not at all. Because your knowledge of the future empowered you. There are nearly an infinity of futures. Wave dreaming the future promotes resonation and retrieves memory of those futures. In fact, with practice, you can experience those futures and thus learn from those futures. Dilbert, merely empowered by his knowledge of the future, of the soup and the salad, chose another way. So we don't have to march down the path to Armageddon just because somebody wrote it in a book. That was what's going to happen. We're now empowered. We have knowledge of the future, and we choose another way. So with that information, you can choose another future. You can invent. You can create, just like the one we're in right now. And remember, the present is just the past of that future. You're already in it. You're already in eternity. There is no need waiting. And you don't have to go back to zero like Mr. Fibonacci did. You can start anywhere and begin putting the sequence together. So, what is your dream? In the book, at the beginning of this chapter, it says, reaching, ever reaching into Nova Spawn, seeking knowing, moving forward, back to memory's home of is. The first hint of the mechanism of cosmology energy transfer was Ernst Mach's observation in 1883. He noticed that the inertia of a body depended on the presence of visible stars, the frame of reference. He asserted every local inertial frame is determined by the composite matter of the universe, and jokingly, when the subway jerks, it is the fixed stars that throw us down. At each point in space, waves from all wave center particles in the universe combine their intensities to form the wave density of space. That will be on the exam at the end. This principle is a quantitative version of Mach's principle because The space medium is the inertial frame for the law, force is equal to mass times acceleration. That's the thing that's holding me on the stage right now, called gravity. It's holding us down. I think we should repeal the law of gravity. No. When mass or change is accelerated, energy exchange takes place between their waves and the surrounding space wave medium. Did you get that? An energy exchange takes place. So without observation, nothing happens. It's like the woman sitting on her front porch praying to God every day, please let me win the lottery. And finally the Lord answers her and says, lady, give me a break, buy a ticket. You gotta have an observation before something will happen. If a tree falls in the forest, blah, 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 Mach's bucket. Actually, it was originally Newton's bucket, but this was an argument that Mach placed upon it. You have a stationary bucket hanging from a rope on a swivel in the middle of the room. Nice and level, minding its own business, everything's fine. Then you take the bucket and you twist it around and around and around and around up on that rope like the rubber band on a rubber band powered airplane. And then you let it go. And the bucket begins to spin. And as the bucket begins to spin, what would you expect the surface of the water to do? Yeah, it curves, right? It moves outward like with centripetal force. But Mach said, wait a minute. What if I was on a ship and I was on the water, in the bucket, and you performed the same experiment? What would I see? I'd see the room spinning around and around and around, right? Me, I'm on the bucket. I'm stationary. It's actually the room that spins. And so when he put this out, we realized even if the swivel was the other way around and somehow we had a way of spinning the room, the water would still curve. Because it's the difference between the frames. So now our observation can have grand effects because human consciousness, the intention of human beings, has a profound effect on the state of 3D matter. You know who Dr. Emoto is, right? Yeah. Water crystals can be changed by the purposeful intention of human beings. Stupid. Love. That's a big difference between those two. Just by human intention applied to the water. When the water is frozen, you get a big difference between the two. Interestingly enough, the human body is about 70% water. Well, if one droplet, one snowflake will change with human intention, what does the water do of the human body with human intention? Big effects. Big effects. Whose intention? Yours. Your intention. And also the intention, on a smaller scale, of those around you. So the environment of intention, of consciousness in which you are bathed, in which you bathe your own flesh, has a profound effect. So these intentions will have effect on your health, on your well-being, on your biology, on the molecular biological processes and physiologies inside of you. As it turns out, we are pretty well down the road with the Human Genome Project, about another 10 years to go before we have it entirely mapped. I read recently, in fact a couple of weeks ago, a decade gone, nothing really new on the Human Genome Project. Except we figured out that there aren't enough genes for the number of proteins it takes to make up a human body. That is to say, a gene makes multiple proteins. In fact, there's probably a large choice of proteins that a gene can make. How does it know? How does it decide? If we're not really a victim of our own genetics, what are we a victim of? Our own environment. That includes the water we drink, the sunlight we're exposed to, the stress we're put under, and our own consciousness. As that changes, we change the proteins that are generated by our own genetics. 5 years ago, I was older than I am now. You don't believe me? I'll show you. You can buy a film of me speaking here in 2006. Big difference. This idea of entanglement of particles, now it's pretty well repeatable around the world. Two particles that can be divided away from the same ion. One particle can be spun using, in this experiment, UV light, and the other particle responds instantaneously, even across vast stretches of distance, up to 11 kilometers in the last experiment, which might as well be across the universe. This is my depiction of the beryllium ion modem. I was speaking with Dr. Jim Bell, who runs the little rovers on Mars, and I, after a couple of hours, said, so what's the real drawback with working with rovers? I mean, they've lasted for years longer than what you thought they would do. What have you really learned about them? He said, well, the frustrating thing is that we'll develop a set of instructions. We send it to Mars, it hits the Marsus probe, which is the one orbiting Mars. It picks it up on a large radio antenna. It goes around the other side of Mars, finds spirit or opportunity, beams the message to opportunity, it takes it in, just makes its move, moves forward 20 yards, moves the camera, takes a sample, whatever. Marsus comes back around, picks up the message of the completed data, gets around the other side, beams it back to Earth, it arrives at Caltech. You think a dial-up modem is slow? This is slow. So I said, well, Jim, why don't you just use a beryllium ion modem? He said, a what? This is Caltech. I said, a beryllium ion modem. You know, you take two particles, a film of them, and put the modem here, put the sensor or the receiver on Mars, and then whatever input you put in here, binary data, is repeated there, picked up with a photomultiplier, and that way you can make it work real time. He said, I've never heard of that. I said, that's right, they haven't been invented yet, but they will be. It was a lot of fun. So let's get back to this attention experiment, this thump of the universe, this choice, this thing we're going to do. The $1 million. Or what you can do with the $1 million. Is this really what we should be dreaming about? Cash and cars? Interesting. It's about building sandcastles, I call it, like the purpose of life. Like, you go to the beach, you get your bucket and your shovel, and you dig in the sand and you contemplate what it is you're going to make. And you're in this state of wonderful bliss and creation. And who cares about how much time goes by? As long as you have enough sunscreen, all is right with the world. Until you finish. What am I going to do now? Well, this guy built his a little too far away from the water. I like to build mine at low tide and then wait for the tide to come in. He's either going to jump on it or he's going to walk away from it. In any case, who's in the state of bliss here? Who's on the real purpose of his existence here? I think the little boy on the left is. He's the one building the sandcastle. And the one on the right is looking at a finished sandcastle. That's a little bit different. So now what we're talking about is process, not solids. We're not talking about anything other than being and doing. And as we do those two things, the having will come. The trick is, the wonderful discovery is, the having won't matter. It won't mean anything to you. It's the being and the doing will overwhelm you with joy. So being, what does this mean? This conjugation of the word is, I don't know. This is the perfect present state of an individual consciousness. The perfect present state of an individual consciousness. An artist, mechanic, a counselor, an architect, a painter, a ditch digger, a plumber, it doesn't matter. This is the doing. This is the thing that you are, the thing that you have become, that you want to create for yourself. No obstacles. no limits, no chance of failure. You remember that when you were little kids? If money was no object, what car would you drive? If there were no challenges, not the challenges, if there were no limits, if there were no obstacles to being what you wanted to be, what would you be? Very important question to find the answer to. There's also no collateral damage from your making this choice. If you're ready for a career change and you're 60 years old, do it. And don't worry about the collateral damage. It won't matter. Doing. The actual energy applied to complete that state of being. That is, you got to go to school and learn something. You got to go through training. You have to gain experience. You have to work. No sitting on the porch. You got to experiment. You got to explore. Yeah. No. No sacrifice. Sacrifice is not the way to do it. Do it. So, make sure that you do this in a state of love. Not in a state of frustration or cynicism. I'm battling with the cynicism part myself. But with love, it can be overcome. The timing, as we get back to this phoenix sequence of knowing when to hit, sort of like playing tetherball. When you let the ball go on the rope, it goes around the pole and comes around to you. If you swing too soon, it's going to go by without any energy added to it. If you swing too late, the same result. Tesla discovered that a steel beam could be shaken like a spaghetti noodle with just 8 pounds of pressure applied to it. 8 pounds. When a 200-pound man jumping up and down on it couldn't move it 1/8 of an inch, 8 pounds could make it move 12 inches up and down, no problem. Because the force was applied at exactly the right moment. Thumped at exactly the resonant frequency of the thing that was to which it was applied. That's where the meditation comes in. That's where learning to listen, to know when to apply that force comes in. So to repeat the steps of manifestation, we design that dream. And then we visualize the after event of that dream with love. Not the process of doing it. That's the experience part. That's the part you have to wait for the universe to bring back that stepping stone so that you know when to move, when to make the phone call, when to send the letter, when to answer. And then the after event is realizing that you're already accepting the Oscar. And I'd like to thank that event. Then you have to listen to input from the universe. Out of that chaos out there, something will resonate with what you have put out. Rhonda Byrne got part of it right with The Secret. What the Bleep certainly made an advancement on that. Unlocking that secret is the Phoenix sequence. Learning to listen for that resonance point to come around and know when to tap it. That's how the zone works. That's how the creative process adds to itself, constructively interferes with itself, like the light bands in Thomas Young's experiment, like the sunflower, the pine cone, the conch shell, the human face, stars, everything works off of that, and so will manifestation. And then you must continue for at least 8 iterations. 3 doesn't get it. You can't give up after 3 or 4. You have to go 8 iterations and you will see the universe begin to move. You'll see the steel beam begin to wobble. You will see the impossible move out of your way. The golden mean will support things that resonate. Letting the potential of all potentialities flow with your life force on top of it is how to reach this point of manifestation. This is remembering the future. My conclusion is human beings can envision the smallest quanta and the birth of solar systems. The observation of past and future information empowers the intention of human beings, each one of us. And we must do it on purpose. If you want to catch a little more of this, you can listen to X Word Radio on Sunday evenings or go to Web Talk Radio. I want you to remember, you are Source. Thank you. Thank you so much. No, we don't have any time for questions, but if you're ready for an electric car, you can go to visionmotorcars.com and see what we're building. Well, yeah, my booth is right outside, so we can talk. And most of this, if not all of this, is on DVD.